Okay, the next depiction of a synaptic connection that we're going to draw is substantially more complicated. And so as you can imagine, it's going to require quite a few more steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to Control C to copy it, move over to give us more space, move over here, Control V to paste it, and we're going to start drawing it. Okay, first we need to draw the shape of the synaptic bouton, and I'm going to use the pen tool to do that. So I'm going to left click on the canvas, now hold shift key, and then I'm going to just so I can work with, so I'm going to click along, and I'm holding the shift key mainly to just work on 45-degree angles. It's just a lot easier to draw. I find it's a lot easier to draw the shape that way. So I'm just going to click along. I'm just getting it close. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay. Now I'm going to go along and make this all centered and nice. So first I'm going to draw a center line. Hold shift. So whenever I move down there, you can see a guide popped up saying intersect, and that's exactly what I want. So click there, hold shift. So I want to make sure this is equal in the center. Well, let's move these closer in, and we're just going to try to get it centered. Looks good. So now I'm going to go back to the selection tool, click delete, then back to the direct selection tool. And I'm going to go along and highlight each individual, or highlight the pairs of anchors so that I can align them so that it looks symmetric along the midline. So I'm going to highlight these top two, click horizontal center, highlight these two, horizontal center. I'm just going to go along the object. You see it straightens things out. Okay, and the bottom two are already horizontally aligned. And so now I want to get it closer to the shape that we have on the right. I might highlight this and bring it 1, 2 inside, and then 1, 2. And then I'm going to highlight these and bring them down so that makes that more of that shape. Maybe bring this down a little bit. It doesn't have to be exact. You know, I mean, synaptic connections look quite a bit varied, so certainly these don't have to look exact. So I'm going to double click on the object, and then now use the direct selection tool, highlight all of the points, and I'm going to hold the shift key and unselect the top two anchors. And then you'll notice when you do that, you get the option of converting these from a corner. Each of these are called corner anchor points, and I'm going to convert it to smooth anchor points. So you see it makes a nice round synaptic bouton looking thing. And so I'm going to click on this anchor. I want this less rounded, so I'm going to move it up a little bit, and then move this up a little bit just so it's symmetric. Maybe a little bit more. Doesn't have to be perfect, just close. Okay, so now that looks roughly the same as what's on the right. Doesn't, again, have to look exact. All right, now I'm going to add the color, so I'm going to put that. So now looks the same color. And I also want, now I'm going to add some shading to give it a little bit of the 3D effect. You notice that there's a shade on the bottom, and what you might notice is you see a shade along the top edge, and it's sharp and no, or it's blurred at the top edge and not blurred at the bottom edge. So we're gonna cause that effect. In order to do that, you have to use a clipping mask. So we're gonna create a clipping mask. I'm gonna click on this object. I'm gonna hold the Alt key and drag it away. So now we have a copy of it. I'm gonna remove the fill so we can see, and then I'm actually gonna you don't have to do this, but I'm gonna lower the size of the thickness of the point. So now I click on this object, and I need to make it smaller because I don't want it to be exactly the same outer edge. I want it to be a little bit smaller. To do that, I first need to make this an enclosed structure. I left it open because, I mean, this is a solution, you know, there's no boundary on the top in a real synapse, so I left that open here. I want to close it when making the clipping mask, so I'm going to select the pen tool, and go over here, click on that anchor, and click over on this anchor. Okay. Now I'm going to click on that object, and then go to Object, Path, and then Offset Path. That's going to make it smaller. And I want to type in negative 0.5 points. So that brings it in. Now I'm going to click that, and so if you look, there's now two objects. One's in a little bit smaller than the other. So I'm going to click on this outward and delete. So now I have it slightly smaller, just by a little bit, than the original object. So now I'm going to highlight both objects. I'm going to center and center. So now that object's in the center. I'm going to click. See that edge? So now I can click on that object, and now I have the inner. Well, actually, I want to highlight both objects. Then I want to re-click on that smaller object. So now you can see that it's in a light blue, indicating that I've selected that. And I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Make Clipping Mask. All right, hold on. Control C. Don't want to do that just yet. I want to first draw the object, the circle here. Sorry. Okay. And Control Z. Draw a little bit smaller. Okay. Like that. And then I want to make this a darker green, and then remove the outer boundary. And then so now I want to click on this object, then hold the shift and click on this other object. So I want to, click on this other object. I want to right click. I want to, arrange, bring to front. So now that line, that smaller object's out in front, you can see it's overlaying that shaded region. So I'm going to click on that shade, then hold shift and click on that the smaller object that I'm going to make into a clipping mask. Then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say Make Clipping Mask. Okay, so now you can see that I've cut that object just beyond that path. Okay. Now you could, since we're doing kind of a cartoonistic depiction of a synapse, you could leave it just like that, having that sharp edge. I kind of would like a blur on it. So let me double click on this. When I double click on it, I'm going to be in this clip group. So anything that I draw outside, so that, remember that clipping boundary or clipping path is right here. What that does is it doesn't show anything outside that boundary. So if I were to draw a line here, okay, and make it black, notice that only the portion that's within the clipping mask is shown. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to add a blur to this. So I'm going to click on that object, go to Effect, go down to Blur, Gaussian Blur. You can kind of play around with it to see what you like. What you want is this bottom boundary of this object to go beyond that bottom portion of that synapse, because you don't want the blur to lighten as it approaches this bottom boundary. That would look a little strange, and you don't want that. So you want to go beyond. You have that blur, and you say okay, click away, and you can see you added that bottom blur. And you can play around with that, and if you want to modify the blur after you've created it, you click on that object. So notice how to get in a clipping path, I click on the objects, one of the objects that's within the clipping group, and then I double click on it. So now I click again, and now I'm in that object. You can also use the direct selection tool or the group select. That would work too. Go over to appearance. So I want to change that blur. Go down here. So this is the appearance menu. I can scroll down to Gaussian blur. And I can reduce this a little bit. Say okay. Okay. So that's pretty close. You can play around with it. You know, maybe I want it a little bit bigger. Click and hold, group selection tool, click on that. And click back on the direct selection tool and make this a little larger. Okay. All right, so now we want to create these synaptic vesicles. Okay, how do you do that? Well, first draw the circle for the synaptic vesicle. Something like, I don't know, maybe that. Okay, and now we want that dark green boundary, so we're going to click dark green boundary. Now I'm going to go back to this color that's inside here. We want a lighter color to be shown. Well, we can go up to this this color guide, and then we can click, you know, a lighter color, whichever one you want. Maybe I want that one. So I click away. That creates the synaptic vesicle. And now I want a whole bunch of these. So what we're going to use is the symbol sprayer tool. But first we got to create this as a symbol. So I'm going to go over to the menu and click on symbol. Okay, if you don't see it over here, then you go up to window and then go down to symbols. Click on it, a window will pop up and you'll drag it and then merge it with the menus over here. Okay, so I'm going to click on this, I'm going to drag it over, and you'll see a little plus sign that shows up just below my mouse pointer. That indicates that it's going to add that object as a symbol. So I click on it, so I release that button, and then you get a whole bunch of options. So I'm going to say it's a graphic. I'm going to keep it as a dynamic symbol, and I'm going to say okay. All right, now I'm going to click away. I'm going to now go over to the symbol sprayer tool, and then I'm going to start spraying away. And those are the synaptic vesicles. And if I wanted to maybe change how concentrated these are, I press enter, and I get all sorts of options. And you can change the density, that's how many of these little circles you add given an area. So if I make this lower, they're going to be more spread out. The intensity will add more of the items. The diameter will say how big of an arrow is it going to distribute those symbols. And there's all sorts of things you can do here. And we'll actually later on in the video explore some of those other objects to create new things. So I'm going to say just okay. This looks great. I'm going to click the direct selection tool to select away. Okay, and now the next step is, well, first I don't want this to be black, so I'm going to make that dark green. That looks better. And I want this, so I want to give the perception that we are looking through a membrane. So that's why I kind of create this little glare. Okay, well that's, to do that, I'm going to use the pencil tool. I'm going to select white, no boundary. I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to move the fidelity to right about here. So not completely smooth, but just approximate. And then I'm just going to draw some, some circles. They don't have to be great. Use the direct selection tool, or the selection tool to change the properties of this. Thought it would already have a fill of white, but it looks like it didn't. It's okay. So I'm gonna now go and draw more of a, kind of created something there. Let's try this again. Okay, something like that. Okay. Use the selection tool to move it to white again. Okay. That already looks really pretty good. And now, I kind of want these synaptic vesicles to go under that to kind of really give the impression. So I'm going to click back on this group, click the symbol sprayer, kind of add a few more. Weak. That wasn't as good. All right, let me change the intensity. Or the 6 or 6. Okay, that looks better. Okay, so I noticed that it added, when I use the symbols tool, I clicked on the group and it just added it to the what I was already shown. So it just keeps adding and it redistributes the rest of it accordingly, rest of the synaptic vessels accordingly. That's why I really like using the spray tool instead of just copying and pasting a whole bunch of vesicles, because you can just continue to manipulate it in all sorts of ways. So now I want to make this semi-transparent. So I'm going to click on that, hold shift and click on that. So now I have both selected. Now I'm going to make them, I'm going to change the opacity by clicking the appearance, going down to fill. Actually, probably better just to go down to this is the opacity over the whole object. I'm going to make this about 80. Okay. There we go. So now it's, pretty 3D looking synaptic vesicle or synaptic connection. So now I want to do the postsynaptic side. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to do Control G to group it, and then I'm going to hold Alt, copy it, and then I'm going to rotate it around, or I guess I can reflect it. Right click, arrange, or transform, reflect from the reflect across the horizontal, and then now I'm going to drag that, maybe give it a little bit of space. And of course I'm going to double click on, I'm going to click on this and press delete so that the other side doesn't have synaptic vesicles. And also I'm going to redraw these, the glare, right click on the group. So I'm gonna delete that, and I want the shade to be kind of this way, and I want the shade to kind of go over this leading edge here, and then maybe put a shade down here. So I'm gonna double click on this. Remember, this is in a clipping mask. So now I'm gonna play around with. Let me use the direct selection tool. Maybe add. Excellent. Kind of drag this along here. Okay. Add another point. That's not, what is that? This one. Trying to bring it in there. That looks fine. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay, now I want to draw one on the bottom. Do something like that. Okay. I want this to also be kind of green. I'm going to add a little bit more of a blur. So blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to add quite a bit more. There. Okay. Something like that. Maybe a little more blur on the top one. Oh, let me actually go over to appearance. Turn down Gaussian blur. Add a little bit more. Something like that. Okay. Yeah. Maybe a little less. Sorry, there's a lot of playing around with these things to make it look just right. Okay, fine. We'll go with that. Okay, so the next thing is we want to draw these receptors. So I'm going to all they are two vertical, brownish, I think I used that color, ellipsoids. So I hold Alt and copied it over, so it looks kind of like a channel receptor. Highlight these and then go up to brush. So I'm going to click and I'm going to drag the brush up, click add. And then, so just to show what exactly I did, I clicked and held the left mouse button and I dragged it over until I saw that plus sign, and I released it. and I want this to be a scatter brush. So I'm going to say, you know what, let me just make this a pattern brush. So, okay. Okay. And I'm going to draw a line across the edge here. I'm going to make this a little curve. So it matches properly. Don't have to do all this detail, but we will anyways. Okay, so now that's quite a bit of, that's high density. We don't quite want all that. So I'm going to modify this. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to add spacing here. So let's do 100. I guess that'll work. Say okay. Apply to strokes. And there we go. And you can straighten that line out. Maybe I wanted it straight. You get the point. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is to create this postsynaptic density looking thing. Okay, so I'm going to go back into this clipping mask group. By double clicking on one of the objects, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to draw a line. I want it to be kind of this green. And maybe I'll hold shift. Maybe I don't want it. I want a darker green. Like that. Okay, so yeah, that'll be fine. So I'm gonna drag it like this. So I'm copying. I'm holding the Alt button and I'm copying. And then now I want to highlight all of those. Click, click, click. There. Now I'm going to hold Alt. And then I'm going to transform, reflect on the horizontal. Say OK. So we're getting there. And then now I want to copy again. Now I want it to be a little more dense inside. So now I'm going to right click and say transform each. And I'm going to adjust, I'm going to change. So this is going to transform each individual object. Okay. So I'm going to highlight this and do 60. And then I'm going to put 60 here and say OK. Now, Control C. Now, I can just, now if I want to select all of these objects, I can just, click on one and then say select same appearance. And so all those objects will be clicked. Okay, I want to create some more of those. So I'm going to, those smaller ones, so hold shift. So I'm holding shift and clicking those smaller objects. Then I'm going to copy them. I'm going to say transform each. Oh, that's what I didn't want to do. I want to right click and say transform, reflect along the horizontal, say OK. Now I want to align all of these. So again, I click on one, say select, go up here to click select, same appearance. Now I want to horizontally align to the top. Okay. Now I want to, distribute these a little better than this. So I'm gonna, play around with it just to get to the way I want. This doesn't have to be exact right now. You get the idea. Maybe I don't want. There. Okay. So now I'm gonna click again, say select same appearance. What we're gonna do is we're gonna group it because this is a pain having to do that every time. So I'm gonna hold Control and say and click G. So hold Control and click G. That groups the object. So now I can just click on one and it selects all of the objects within that group. Okay, so now I want to add a little bit of a blur. So I go Effect. So I click Effect, Blur, Gaussian blur. I don't want quite that much. I want it to kind of look good. So I say OK. Now I want it to fade in to this color here. So I'm going to go to the gradient. And I'm going to do linear. And I'm going to do the stroke that way. linear. Okay, so now notice that the gradient on some of these lines is going to more dark in some cases. So we want to fix that. So I want to click on, so double click, I want to click on those ones that are making the mistake. And then I want to then rotate them around so that they are having the same effect as the other ones. Okay. Oh, and there's another one here. So let's get those two. This one too. Okay. Yeah, now they're all going to the same direction now. Let me click on this again. Okay, so we want this to fade towards a more transparent. So first we need to get rid of this fill inside. So I'm gonna cancel the fill inside. And now we're going to cancel. Now I'm gonna click on the gradient, and now I'm gonna make this transparent. 0. Okay. And now what we want to do is we want to make this, come on, click on this. All right, click on this again. So now we want to make this the same color as that background. So I'm going to double click on it. Then I'm going to click on this eyedropper and click on that. Okay. And then we're going to drag this out like that just to make it look a little better. And then we want to extend these out. Now the other thing is we want this to be the color of this. Okay. And then we want this to be transparent. Okay. So there, now we've got the same effect as over here. I think I used a different color. That's okay. You can play around with it to get the way you want. Okay, yeah, in fact, why don't we just go ahead and do that? Because I like that. Maybe do a color like that. Ah, there we go. So, all right, so now we've got the postsynaptic density. The next thing is we want to make this a receptor storage inside of the postsynaptic bouton. So the way we do that is we use that same symbol that we had before down here. This time we're going to draw a line that goes across this way. Notice I still have that gradient effect on the line. That's okay. I'm just going to go over here and click to the green so that's the same color as this. We want to bring this forward, so right click, arrange, bring to the front. And let's group this object, and then we're going to center these. Now I'm going to click on the brush tool. I'm going to scan to the top, and I'm going to highlight this and drag it over till I see the plus sign. So, and it's kind of the same way as we did this symbol sprayer tool before. And then we're going to go down to pattern brush. Say OK, and then you get a window that pops up. This is all fine. Say OK. Oh, actually, well, I wanted that line in the center in this case. So I didn't want a line before. So notice on this brush, I didn't want a line before because I didn't want it to overlay the previous line. I didn't want it to look strange. Now I really want a line. So that's why I added the line and added it as a brush. So let me make a circle. Okay, I want the inside to, so I'm just going to use the eyedropper tool to make it look same as the appearance as the synapse. And then I want to click on this. And you can keep it that density, or you can double click on it and change the spacing a little bit. Maybe negative 50. Let's see what that looks like. It won't let me do that. Okay. So you change the spacing by changing the width of this line. So, but right now you kind of get the idea. That's the point. And you notice it distorts the image a little bit. That's kind of just what it's going to do. There's not much other than just placing the items individually. Well, there is another way you can do it. Let's do it that way. This will be instructive. So I can draw the circle. Okay. Then I can take this receptor and put it right here. Just bring it to the front. Arrange. Bring it to the front. Let's go ahead and group it. Go inside this group. So then I click on this one object. And then I can do object repeat radial. So now I can center that. I can expand. Oh, that's going to make that big. I don't want to do that. I can expand. And then, so this expands. This will make the whole thing larger, including the objects. We don't want to do that. This inner circle will change how big the circle is, but we're going to put it right about there. And then this changes the density of the objects. So there we go. That's finished. That looks better than the distorted image. Okay. And now we're going to bring this up here a little bit. Okay, and then now we want to add the glare lastly, and that's the same as we did before. So I'm going to draw it like this. I won't make it look perfect just because you get the idea. And then, maybe something like that. And hold shift, click there, go back to appearance, go down to the bottom, opacity, we'll make this 80. And there we go. So that is close to what you see on the left.